デレーターは楽天株式会社グローバルマーケティング統括部ディレクターラフール・カダバコル様にお務めいただきます。
And the panelist is NBA Asia Managing Director, Mr. Scott Levy. From Nielsen Sport, Managing Director Asia, Mr. Guy Port. And also from SC Barcelona, Head of Partnership Activation, Ms. Judith Rubinat.
I now hand things over to our moderator, Rahul 様、よろしくお願いいたします。
Firstly, thank you. Thank you very much for making the time to join us for this session. So I'll start with giving you a brief context on what we're going to be discussing today. The industry and competitive landscape is significantly changing, both for business and brands. There is a need for deeper collaborations between brands and sports platforms. Brands are looking to get more value out of partnerships. Sports platforms and teams are constantly looking to add value by reinventing and revisioning themselves. This is what we will look to discuss in the session today. And we will deep dive into the art of creating a winning collaboration between sports franchisees and corporations. Today, joining us as panelists, we have the biggest names in the world of sports and information management. And we will discuss the realities and changing dynamics of partnerships. They will share their knowledge on how to maximize mutual value of a partnership by leveraging the core pillars of marketing, technology, and innovation. Without further ado, let me introduce our panelists for today. Scott Levy is the Managing Director of NBA Asia and oversees development and expansion of NBA's strategic initiatives in Asia. Welcome, Scott. Thank you. Can we have the NBA video, please?
Few things in life have the ability to unite people, transcending age, gender, and cultural divides. Common threads that bring us together to have fun, to just let go. Yes! An invitation to participate in the extraordinary, unpredictable, and seemingly impossible. Up close and personal. Performed on a global stage by the world's most creative and awe-inspiring athletes.
You gotta pinch me!
Legends who pass the torch from generation to generation, lifting spirits and inspiring us all to reach higher and dream even bigger. This is why we play. This is the NBA.
What a great video that was. Thank you once again, Scott, for joining us today. Our second panelist is Guy Port. He's the Managing Director for Nielsen Sports in Asia, overseeing 6 offices across the region. He has 15 years working with Nielsen Sports, previously called Rakuten, delivering research and insight solutions across the global sports business industry. So thank you for coming in, Guy. And can we have the Nielsen video, please? Thank you. Thank you, Guy. Thank you for being here. Our third panelist for the session today is Judith Rubinat. She is the head of partnership activation, FC Barcelona. She's an expert in 360 communications and sponsorships and has been the head of partnership activation at FCB since January 2018. Big job. She has more than 20 years in the sports and communications industry, including working with global brands like Nike. Thank you for joining us today, Judith. And can we have the FC Barcelona video, please?
You think you know me, don't you? I'm much more than that. You think I'm nothing more than my victories on the field. But it's more than just what happens out there, on the grass, on the court, on the ground. In the biggest stadium in Europe, and even in places where grass never grows. You think I'm nothing more than my trophies, but what is a trophy? A girl's first soccer match? A boy with a baccalaureate certificate? A discovery? I know I'm not simple. There's no place for simplicity here. The score? That's just numbers for me. What matters is the way we reach our goals. The way others reach their goals. It's much more than just winning or losing. Because I have a responsibility. That's what it means to be powerful. I can change a person's life. That's beautiful. That's challenging, but it's true. I can share my knowledge with those who can need it. I can draw your gaze to where no one's looking. I can be where others can't be. Next to people others can't be with. I can, so I have to. This is why I fight to be the leader. This is why I persevere to become better, excellent. This is why I'm not just one person. I'm hundreds, thousands, millions. This is why we're different. This is why we're much more than a club.
Thank you. Thank you once again. I'd like to thank all of you for traveling the distance to be here and joining us for this session. So I'm going to start with a question which probably has nothing to do with this topic, or maybe it does. I don't know. We'll know based on your answers. Some of you may have traveled to Japan in the past, or probably traveling very often, and some of you may have not. But just want to understand, what are your views on Japan? Maybe Scott?
First of all, thank you for inviting the NBA to participate here at Nest, and thank you for the partnership with Rakuten. We're very excited about that. I've been traveling to Japan for about 20 years. This is my third time here just this year. And the first time this year, I was up in Hokkaido skiing, which is always an incredible experience. So I always look forward to coming back. The food's amazing, the people are great, and I get to work with some of the most innovative and creative companies in the world. So thrilled to be back again.
What about you, Guy? Let's see what you got to say.
Yep, not 20 years, but thank you for having us here. I've been coming here for the last few years about once a month, and I use the expression to my family at home, I skip off the plane at Haneda Airport because I love it so much in Tokyo. And for me, what's been really exciting is just looking at how the Olympics has just completely changed the momentum of sports here. You know, from the moment you walk off the plane to every discussion we're in, I think the build up to 2020 is going to be fantastic, and that's the energy that I feel when I walk off the plane.
Oh, that's great. We're going to be talking a lot about that as we go through the session. Judith, I really want to know what your answer is.
Well, as you say, it's only 3 months in Football Club Barcelona, so I started in January, and it's my first time in Japan, so I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and of course, thank you, Rakuten, for sponsoring Football Club Barcelona. And honestly, I'm excited in all the ways, so in economic subject, as we are talking, in sponsorship, but also, as my colleague says, in food and in life. So I make sure that I will have some free time tomorrow to explore the city and discover this amazing city.
You will not have a dull moment, I assure you that. So going straight into our topic for today. So we have a few questions. We're going to be opening questions to the audience as well. So as you go through the session, please do take notes and keep those questions ready. So Scott, I'm going to start with you. You've been an industry leader. You've been a lot of experience coming in several transformation cycles within the NBA and the sport. What is your view on the status and nature of partnerships today?
I think it's a fascinating time right now. It's the technology that's available to us and ability to communicate with our fans and consumers in general. We've never been able to engage the way we can today. At the NBA, we pride ourselves in being early adopters and innovators. We were the first sports league to launch our own channel, NBA TV. We were the first league in 2001 to stream a live game. We've done our content in 3D. In 2015, we did our first game in 4G. And now we have games available on a weekly basis through VR. And we're one of the first sports brands, and now definitely the leading sports brand, along with Barcelona. In social media, we have over 1.2 billion followers. And so when you look at a partnership with a company, it's really important that you're working with companies that are innovators, that are leaders, that are going to allow you to engage with your consumers in the places that they are. And I think that's critical when you look at how to bring companies together and maximize that relationship.
Judith, I'm going to go to you now. As one of the biggest brands in the world of soccer and arguably in the world of sport, you're probably the most sought after person right now within your management team. What are your views? Do you think, and also from your experience at Nike, how do you see this whole partnership landscape changing? What are your views on this?
Well, I think that the most important thing that I used to say quite often these days is that we are changing from sponsorship to partnership. And I think that with this simple change of wording, I think it represents the new way of working with partners. So we are not only sponsors, or we are not only need sponsors, we need partners. We need to work together with the brands, and we need to work on a win-win strategy for both sides. So I think it's key to start sharing knowledge, to start sharing goals, and to start working together and do things differently from what we have done probably in the past, and start doing as a unique figure, the brand, and also for us, the Football Club Barcelona.
Great. Guy, with all of this going on and the ROI question popping up more often than in the past, I think every brand and the sports team or league will be looking to find different ways of measuring themselves. So what is your view from the outside?
Yeah, look, I think when you talk about evolution and change here, and you look at ROI and measurement, technology's had a huge impact on our industry. You just think about the speed that data is available and the depth of information. It used to be we would conduct a research survey by calling someone at home, interrupting your dinner, making ourselves painful, and maybe 3 months later you'd see the results. These days, that's just not unacceptable. And the speed of data collection, whether it be automated image brand tracking instantaneously, social media metrics live, talking to fans about a brand activation during halftime, and getting that data back in your hand almost on an at-live basis is where our measurement industry is so exciting and what technology has allowed us to do.
And obviously, sports teams and leagues, the rules are also changing significantly. They're adding more new assets in order to, one is to commercialize, two is also to keep the interests of brands and consumers and fans, more importantly. So did you have to introduce new toolkits in order to keep up with all of these changes?
Yeah, I think the way that sport's changed and the consumption is completely different. And you look at the NBA, for example, and how much of that content is now highlights based on social media, right? When that wasn't even in the mix a few years ago. So for us, the biggest question is now, what's the value for brands we're driving through social media? Highlights of a Barcelona game, an image of an NBA player, our ability to take all that information in And you've now got the world's biggest focus group out there talking about brands and talking about sports all the time. So the information that sits in social media posts for us to analyse as a research company has really opened up new doors in sponsorship. And you sometimes don't even need a survey anymore because you've got what people are telling you right there and then on the posts.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think there's a saying where brands are talking or consumers are talking, but are you listening? I think is more the question these days. So Scott, let me go to you. How has the league reinvented or reimagined itself to suit the needs of brands, and more importantly than brands, I want your views on, have these changes happened because the league has constantly been listening to fans, and would be great to get your insight on this.
I don't think we necessarily reinvent ourselves as we expand and increase. The game on the court continues to develop. The players become more athletic, what they can do, and how the game is both officiated and played, and with data and analytics, even how you select your players and the kind of plays that you run. So the game is constantly changing. But with partners, it's about bringing more and more assets to bear and understanding what it is that the partner is trying to achieve. You saw in that video at the beginning, when you think of our players, of course you think of the athleticism on the court, but there's so much more to them and to the brand of the NBA. I mean, we're authentic in fashion, in gaming, in technology, and in music. I mean, you saw Jay-Z and Beyonce in the front, and we have several owners. Usher is an owner, and Drake is an owner. And so, all these elements of the NBA are available for our partners to engage with, and figuring out exactly how we use the different elements of the game to really maximize the partnership and the KPIs of our partner. That's how we reinvent it.
So Judith, I know more than a club is probably the best way to define FC Barcelona. So same question to you. So what are the things that the club is actually doing right now in order to differentiate itself, in order to give fans way beyond what they actually are looking for? Anything that you can talk about?
I think that, of course, all the digital transformation is also transforming all the partnership activations that we are doing. And of course, we want to connect with the fan, and we're working with all the social media platforms. In Football Club Barcelona, we are leaders of followers in social media, with more than 300 followers in all social media platforms. So I think that with this, if you add this to other things like having an own style of play, for example, like Football Club Barcelona have, of having the Foundation Barça, where we work for almost 1 million kids around the world to provide, trying to provide a better life for them. And I think that it's something that we need to spread and let the people know what is Football Club Barcelona besides the game and besides Messi and besides the moment that they play, of course. So as we said, more than a club means a lot of things, and our goal in all the marketing and all the partnership team is trying to explain to the consumer and to the fan what is this, what is Barcelona.
So I think you brought up a very interesting point, which is today's world is more about partnerships and not sponsorships. I'd really like to ask each one of you, what according to you is the fundamental difference between a sponsorship and a partnership? You could even give examples if required. You may not want to call a bad sponsor on stage now, but...
No, I think that Rakuten and Barcelona is a good example of this, because we work as partners. So it's not only an economic transition because of the sponsorship. So I think that we also work, of course, with brands like Nike, that I used to work with them many years. And I think that the good thing of this partnership is that we share what we want to do. We share culture, we share the same values, and at the end, we share the objectives that we wanna have. So I think it's key for us. It's not only doing what you wanna do, it's doing together with the partner and trying to join, knowledge, as I said, to do better things and to connect better with the fan and with the consumer.
Scott, maybe I'll jump to you and then come back to you, Guy.
Yeah, I think it's really, the word defines it, partnership. When we're working with companies, it's making sure that they are helping to grow our business and we're helping to grow their business. And we have to spend the time to understand what the goals are. If it's just a transfer of intellectual property and then you say, well, good luck, we'll see you in 3 years, I hope you're successful, that's probably a sponsorship. But when you sit at the table and say, all right, what are you trying to achieve? Here are the assets that we have available to us, and how are we going to use those to grow the business? And you've said to me many times is your goal is to grow the sport of basketball. That's a tremendous partner for us to have, that is part of your objective, is to make sure that the game continues to grow. And we have a similar situation. We have a program called Junior NBA. And I need to slow down here because the translator's going to work really hard here. But we have a program in Southeast Asia called Junior NBA, which is designed to use basketball as a vehicle to help kids live healthy and active lifestyles. So when we were looking for partners there, we found a company called Friesland Campina, which is one of the largest dairy companies in the world. And their messaging is drink, move, be strong. And that ties in perfectly with what we're trying to do. So when they are doing their marketing, whether it includes the NBA or not, they're sending the exact same message. So when we combine forces, we amplify everything we're trying to do, and it becomes a much bigger communication tool.
Guy, let me get your views, but I have a follow-up question just on this. So what, in your opinion, is the difference between a sponsorship and a partnership?
Look, I think the difference can be answered is if you're sitting in the rights holder chair at a football club or a basketball league and you say, the benefit we're getting is more than the check, right? So these days, one of the biggest questions is we need your skills, we need your services. In the case of Rakuten, we need your technology to make our organisation better. How can the e-commerce skills Rakuten help the NBA in the messaging that we're trying to do in that industry? And that transfer of services and knowledge is a really key one. And I look at the NBA and another technology partner that you've got in SAP, and the way that it's transformed how the NBA can present statistics to fans all around the world and make it really easy for... We were sitting in the room half an hour ago looking at box scores of Golden State Warriors games. That's something that was enabled by a technology of a partner. So I think, that they're the types of things that are really interesting when there's skill and service and product that makes a team or a league better other than just the money.
I have one follow-up question for you on this same point. So with brands now looking for partnerships, or both way, both sports teams, leagues, or brands looking for partnerships and not sponsorships, what are the questions that you're getting in terms of tracking, in terms of measuring all of this? Obviously, it must be fundamentally very different, right, going forward?
Yeah. Look, they are different. I think reflecting on that today, the difference is sometimes not even what the questions are, but when we're getting asked. So when I started 15 years ago, the standard question was my phone would ring and it'd be, hey, I'm Rahul from Rakuten. We've just signed a deal with Barcelona. We're 2 years in and I need to go meet the boss tomorrow and tell him what value we've delivered. Help, right? And sometimes it's late at that stage to be able to tell that story.
Please tell the audience that was an example and I didn't call you.
Yeah, that was just an example. These days, the questions that brands are coming to us are, we've got funds to invest in Asia, and what do we do with it? And the question is more just about who reaches the most eyeballs. It's more about, okay, we know that this sport will fit to our demographic, which is young males, but help us select a sport that's going to fit. Help us identify what that business opportunity is and where the opportunity is to develop. For example, it could be a tyre company, something who we worked with recently, saying, which sports property will allow us to sell the most tyres over the next 5 years across Asia? And so that's how the landscape's changing for me. The questions are far more at the front end versus being weighted towards proof of performance.
So I know there's a lot of talk about, it's not just about storytelling, but there's also story doing, which is not just show me, but also show me and tell me. For example, in Rakuten's case, it's more experiential branding for us. We're a services company, it's not a product, right? So in this case, how would measurement differ? I got a sense of what questions you get these days, but from a story doing perspective, is it any different? Like, how do you actually embed some of the services into the fan engagement journey, for example, right?
I think the question in the data points that we're using, doing that over a longer period of time. So that the big thing about not everybody can have a short-term impact that an event is held, and within that week they can sell 100 litres of beer or 1,000 soccer boots. So in the case of a services company, our job is to track how the brand perception of that service has changed over time. And then are ultimately people starting to use that service in a different way, and is that driving revenue? So, you know, the data metrics that we're using as sort of the modelling to take from brand to revenue over time is how we can start answering those questions from a service angle.
I'd like to get your views on that, Scott. How are conversations changing with brands that you talk to, both from a commercial standpoint and after you've signed the deal? What are the conversations?
I'd like to pick up on a point that Guy just made, and that is when you decide to do your measurement. And you know, we really focus with our partners as to don't take a scattershot approach to working with the NBA. There may be a lot of things that you think are interesting, but if they're not cohesive, if they're not supporting each other, if one is not driving the consumers to another experience, and you're looking for metrics at the end of that experience, whether that be 1 year or 3 years, I mean, you have to give yourself time to have an impact on the community. And if you're looking for real short-term results, you may not be doing the right things to really associate your brands and maximize the partnership. So I think the long-term view with the short-term strategy building on that, I think that's really important to be successful.
Head of activation, this is probably one of the questions everybody's asking you in terms of how exactly do I measure an activation that we launch? So anything that, I mean...
No, as Guy said, we work with Nielsen trying to evaluate everything that we are done. But I think that there are two different ways of evaluation. The quantity, of course, and we want to know exactly the return and the economic return that we have of some activations. But I'm a fan of the quality activations and the quality evaluations. So, of course, we have a lot of things to measure, the fans and the social media, the numbers. But of course, we also want to know the quality of the messages that we want to spread, and we also want to know exactly how are we doing things. So for me, it's key. Not also the quantity, which of course it's very, very important, and in economic things it's key, but also the quality for a club like us is also very important to know for us and also for the partners.
Just a follow-up to that, how important is philosophy and values when you actually pick a sponsor? Of course, you did mention something to the effect of it's important to align on overall goals before you decide on a partnership. So how important is philosophy and values?
For us, it's very important. So Football Club Barcelona has their own values, and we want to work with partners that share same values that we have. And for that reason, as I said, we had the Fundació Barça, foundation that we work with kids. We have our own style that shows that it's not just about winning, it's about playing well, it's about considering the other, it's about teamwork. So for us, it's key in terms of partnership to try to find the partners that are aligned with us with the same values, because of course sports, it's big, the audience is big. So I think that we have the responsibility in Football Club Barcelona, but also with the partners that we partner, to try to help as much as we can to spread the values that we follow.
Scott, we were talking about this earlier. The entire landscape is changing. I don't think a discussion with a sports team or a league, it's not about a bunch of administrators sitting on the other side and selling assets and rights, but it's actually two brands talking to each other and figuring out what can each do for the other in achieving objectives. So when you pick a partner, what do you look for before even deciding, first of all, who that partner should be, and how can they maximize your marketing and business objectives?
You know, I think commitment and engagement are probably the two biggest things we look for. I mean, the NBA alone, here in Asia alone, we have over 200 people on the ground, and we have a lot of assets and a lot of different activities that we're doing. When we bring a partner on board, our goal is to make sure they're going to take advantage of that. You're not going to be successful with us if
you don't fully understand the brand, if you're not willing to take the time and figure out how to really maximize the relationship. And we clearly don't want to, after 3 years, if you look at us and say, that didn't work for us, well, that's on us as much as it is on the partner. So we really want to make sure when we sit down that there are a lot of ideas, there's a lot of innovation, there's a commitment, there's a team, and there's an aspiration to do something really interesting, something innovative, and something that really will potentially change the landscape in partnerships in sport.
Guy, I like the way it's called information management now, and research is just one part of it, and that itself is a huge change, and it's a much bigger set that we're talking about now. Does this change significantly information management itself and research skill sets, tools that you use between sports platforms, or is it pretty common across all sports?
I think it's common across sports. Probably the difference is across brands. It's really very, very different. So you have a look at the data points, for example, that we work with Kia, an automobile company, to look at what is the impact of the Australian Open tennis and how is that helping them sell automobiles. The metrics that we deliver to ROI there will be very, very different from a service technology such as Rakuten. So I'd say similar across sports. Where the industry is really developed is how niche and how different reporting Barcelona or the NBA will do to different brands in different industry groups, because the outcome needs to be so varied across them.
Judith, in terms of trends, what do you think are current trends for the audience benefit that are very different from what people would have seen, say, 5 years ago? What are the top trends that you're seeing in this partnership or sponsorship or partnership landscape right now?
Well, I think that I'm not saying anything new if I say that digital, of course, it's key. So brand content is key also for us. And as you said, it's not only about storytelling, it's about story doing. So I think it's a moment right now to try to explore new brand content platforms and new brand content stories. And I think that we need to work also trying to join the consumer or the fan into the club and work with them also to do brand content together with them. So let them get into the club or get into the brand and work together in specific things that they are looking for us, and the specific things that we can offer to them, and work together in this big umbrella, which is the brand content concept. And I think that it's not the future, it's the present, but I think it's something that we need to start deeping dive into this and start doing big things related to this.
Scott, do you want to add something to that?
Sure. We're seeing two things in particular. I think consumer data is changing everything about how we approach. I mean, when we look at selling season tickets or selling our OTT platform, League Pass, or really any direct-to-consumer opportunity, putting aside the current Facebook issues that are going on, consumers are volunteering, opting in to engage with us and giving us a tremendous amount of information about them and telling us what they want. So being able, as Guy's been saying, to be able to take that information in, being able to analyze it, and then do something productive with it is, it's critical. I think if you're not doing that, you're not going to be successful in the future. And the other trend that is really interesting, I'm not sure, I think sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it could be an obstacle, is our players' ability to go direct to consumer as well. Kevin Durant has just launched his own YouTube channel, which is great because Kevin Durant is putting content out there and engaging an audience, but that content would normally sit on an NBA platform. But Kevin has his own vehicle to go out, and many players have their own vehicle now. So obviously that helps us engage an audience, but at the same time, maybe it splits the audience a little bit too. So it's just fascinating to participate in it, and we'll see how it all develops.
Guy, this one's for you. So the badge program was launched as a pilot program by the NBA. Now, obviously, this is the first year. We're one of the badge partners, and we work with the Warriors. Just want to understand, from a technology standpoint, is there anything different that needs to be done in order to track something like this as just a brand asset?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember I was working in the US about 5 or 6 years ago when the patch concept first came up, and it was actually voted down by the NBA Board of Governors the first time around, and then it came in. And I think in American sport, it was really new. Football, it's been around for, 50, 100 years to have a logo on the jersey. And from a technology standpoint, I think the big difference is that everywhere the players go now, that the badge goes with them, right? So for us, in terms of tech, we need to develop tracking systems that every single time there's an image or a story about Kevin Durant in the media, he's going to have his patch on there. We need to be able to monitor that, and we need to be able to look at the extent of it. And you look globally, the ability now that it's given you, as Rakuten, the presence that anyone around the world watching an NBA game now can actually see and connect to that jersey on the patch. We need to understand who those fans are around the world before. A few years ago, to be in the NBA, it was very local marketing based via sponsorship. So it was all very local companies. So our ability to track everywhere across platforms, social media, online media, TV and linear media, and our ability to be able to say to an NBA team, here's exactly what a fan of yours in Sydney, Australia and Tokyo, Japan is watching, and how much they're getting exposed to your brand and engaging is probably the key thing.
Scott, just want to hear from you. This has been the launch year for you. How is a lot of results out there, a lot of numbers out there. So how are the fans perceiving this program?
I think there's been less a minimal reaction from fans. The jerseys, the jersey sales are continuing to grow. I really don't see any negative reaction at all. From the partner's point of view, I think the partners that have established broader relationships that are doing more than just the badge itself are the ones that are benefiting the most. It's one thing to have that presence, and it's another thing to really take advantage of that association and have other elements of the program that are going to further enhance the relationship between the brands.
This is a question for Scott and Judith. You can decide who wants to go first. But how can clubs and teams ensure that their brand and partners' brands gets attention when they're competing with other big sports and, first of all, your own superstars, right? Because they're brands themselves. So, any views on that?
Yeah, I think it's more or less what we said before. Is that I think it's about working together. So sharing things, sharing goals, and sharing knowledge. So of course, with Football Club Barcelona, we have other partners. So we have almost 45 partners right now. So we need to give time to all these partners, and of course, the good results are behind the good work. So if we work close to the partner, understanding what they need and why are they partnering us, and for us also, why we are partnering them. Because in Football Club Barcelona, of course, we want to partner the best brands in the world. So there is also a big job to do here. So once we have these big partners, I think that our goal from them and from us is to make it bigger and to make it successful. So it's spending time together and sharing what we want to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with Judith. If it's truly a partnership, then you're going to spend the time to figure out what the goals are and how you're going to structure that. The consumers, the fans of the NBA, they are engaged with many products and many categories, and there's plenty of space for a lot of companies to engage with that same fan base. And then there are so many different elements of the NBA where you can exploit. So figure out what is the right opportunity within the brand, and I think you'll stand out.
Guy, this is a slightly different question. I know we've been speaking a lot about how the metrics have been changing based on the evolution of the sport itself. But what are some of the metrics that brands overlook sometimes, or sports teams for that matter, in evaluating a partnership? Is there something that they miss completely?
Yeah, look, I think I'll give one example. When you use sponsorship, there are a lot of different benefits out there, particularly for big organisations. One of them that I think is often missed is actually what happens within your own organisation from an employee standpoint. And some of the most successful sponsorships that we've seen have been targeted at companies that might have hundreds of thousands of employees around the world. And they know by keeping their employees happy, keeping them motivated, using a property such as the Olympics, Barcelona, or the NBA, their productivity is going to be far more effective than anything to do with consumers. So I think if you can use these properties to motivate your staff, it's one of the biggest overlooked areas of sponsorship. And I think the companies that really do that well and engage their staff all the way through to let them take the benefit, it's actually sometimes more beneficial than what they're getting out of B2B or B2C relationships.
Most often brands obviously sponsor or partner with sports teams in order to build that emotional connection that's required. And I think sports platforms do that a lot better than other entertainment platforms out there. So how is the NBA, for example, creating that emotional connection with your fan base?
One of the great things about sport is the emotion is there already. There's the relationships with the players and the teams, and the content is continually renewing. So every single day there is a moment that is incredible, and there's end of game, there's great shots that could decide the game, could decide the playoffs, could decide a championship. An example is we have a partner, Tissot, which is our official timekeeper and official watch of the NBA. And we created a segment called Buzzer Beaters. And some of the great moments in NBA history are shots that were released when the clock was still going and landed when the clock was expired. And that decided whatever that particular game or that series was involved. And Tissot, being time, it was a perfect association. And we launched that program, and we were averaging 9 million views a month. We had over 200 million views of that content. It was incredibly successful. And so the emotion of the buzzer beater tied with the brand, it just translated perfectly. And I think there are so many moments of sport, both on the court and off the court, which emotionally tie our fans together, which is what makes sports so great, that there are a lot of opportunities to do that.
Thank you. Judith, in terms of communications and fan engagement methods, you've spoken about digital extensively. Any examples you can give of how the club is engaging with fans? Anything that's different from what other clubs do. Chatbots, for example. I know we've done something together with Viber. So just wanted to hear your thoughts on this.
I think that in digital, as I said, there is a large way to explore. But right now, for example, we are trying we're starting to do post before the game, during the game, and after the game. We are also including our players that, of course, are the biggest connection, the emotional biggest connection with the fans. So we are also using their platforms, or trying to use their platforms to connect the player, the club, and the consumer and the fan. So I think that the mix of these things and trying to explore new ways of connecting with them in all the time that the game is playing, for example, not only at the beginning or not only at the end. So I think it's key. So we used to communicate through social media when the game starts and then when the game ends, saying, okay, we're gonna start the game, okay, we won or we lose. And now we are start doing things during the game that show us that the connection is more strong than, of course, doing just at the beginning or at the end of a game. So we need to explore on that.
Scott, from your side, in terms of fan engagement methods using technology, I know you've already spoken about a few already in terms of VR and stuff. Any examples that you can share with the audience today?
I think we really use everything that's available to us depending on where. I mean, we've just started with Viber, and that's going to be a key platform for us moving forward. We have millions of followers online, and it depends on the country. So for Line, it's here, it's in Thailand and Indonesia, and here in Japan. And Facebook is a key communication in many other countries. YouTube, the number of people, as Guy said earlier, the number of people that their initial and primary experience with the NBA is by watching highlights on the NBA channel on YouTube is incredible. And if you look at the experiences across each of these platforms, they are unique. These are not cookie cutter platforms. People don't engage with them in the same way. You can't just put the same content on there. Some of them can be used for tune-ins to games. Others can be used for profile pieces. Others are daily highlights. It's really important to understand how your fans are engaging with each each element, and then curating your content specifically for that one.
Kai, there's so much going on in Japan right now with the Rugby World Cup coming up. We have the Olympics in 2020, and there's a lot of investment in the sports and sports-related areas. What would be your advice to brands keeping all of this that's coming up?
Look, I'd first advice is to the consumers, which is enjoy it. I think people in Tokyo don't realize over the next 2 years how lucky you are to have the Rugby World Cup and what I think will be one of the most exciting Olympics in recent memory on the ground. So make sure you take time out as a fan to go and experience something and have a good time. I think the other trend that we've seen with brands here and what they can do is that the Olympics has changed a somewhat traditional mindset in Japan that sports is actually a legitimate marketing tool. There were always international companies like a Toyota who have used sports for many years, or Fuji with the Olympics, but a lot of the more domestic-based organisations refused to admit that sports was a legitimate marketing tactic. And I think the Olympics has really changed that way of thinking, and it opens brands up to saying not only can we use sports in Japan, but looking at where we need to grow outside of domestic economy, we can use sports outside of Japan to introduce ourselves, and look at the likes of what Rakuten's done, or Yokohama on the front of Chelsea. So I think the exciting thing for me and my advice to brands is some of you may be involved in 2020 and some of you may not, but what's happening in 2021? There's a very, very strong domestic sports economy here through football, baseball, basketball. We were in an event on the weekend which was extreme sports BMXing, and they had 50,000 people there enjoying it. So how can you use sports within your marketing platform here? And for those of you that want to introduce yourselves to the world, sports is one of the most successful ways to do that and to really introduce yourself and get familiar. So that's my message.
So if brands were actually looking to enter into partnerships with sport platforms, when is the right time to call someone like you? Is it at the time when they ink the deal, or they say, you know what, it takes a year for me to kind of get to some base, and then we start tracking? What's your advice on that?
Yeah, I think as soon as you've got an inkling of getting some budget, that's when you want to make the call. To use my example, that the panic 2 years in is too late. And, sponsorship spend is always a very sensitive topic, and you want to make sure that you've given yourself the best chance possible to choose the right property and the one that's got the biggest upside for you. So data for me is almost more important in the selection phase than it is in the after phase, because the decision's been made. So that's when I'd really be using the information as much as possible.
Scott and Judith, what would your advice be to brands who are looking for partners in the sports area?
I think that a clear thing to partner is being honestly. So I think that the partner should partner a company that feel close to, as we said, that share values. And I think it's more than an economic thing. It's something bigger than this. And I would say that you need to find someone that you can work together and you can work as a unique company, as I said in this way.
Scott?
Yeah, take advantage of the emotion of the fans supporting their country and their athletes, the emotion of the athletes themselves and the struggles that they have gone through to get to this moment, the intensity of the competition. And the Olympics are an incredible, special sporting event and experience for everybody who participates. And there's so much to work with, but the emotion, the ups and downs that go on during that period of time are just incredible.
That was going to be my next question on specific to Olympics, but I think you've all taken ahead at Olympics. So thank you very much for your views. I think we have just about some time to get a few questions in to our panelists. It's a great opportunity. It's your only time to ask anything that you want. Anyone? Usually when the first question starts, then everything rolls. So, oh yeah, great.
Hi. Test. Hi. I'm actually curious what your most important KPIs are. How do you measure and how do you explain to a brand what you should be focused on?
I think it depends on what the brand is trying to achieve. Our KPIs, we have KPIs for our business, but the KPIs of a partnership are going to be driven really by what that partner is trying to achieve. If it's exposure on social media or through digital content, then we'll measure that. If it's the number of people that are coming through an event or signing up for a promotion, it really is really tied directly to the goals of each partner.
Does that answer your question?
I do agree with Scott. So it depends on the goals that you are looking for, and of course, with work like the Nielsen Sports is doing, you also have the numbers of what you want to achieve. So I think it's more or less what he said.
Yeah, you're going to have different. I'll use 3 different scenarios here of numbers, right? One could be an automotive company, and their desire for us is how many cars did we sell through our partnership with that league over the course of 3 years. On another example, it could be an airline that's introducing itself around the world, and their core benefit is just to say, can we say that 3 years down the track, we're much more familiar with people in Tokyo who never have heard of our airline 3 years ago, but because we are now on the jersey of their favourite football team, they're going to be comfortable to fly with us compared to where they sit. So I don't think there's a magic one number that will fit there, but depending on as long as you're very, very clear on what you're trying to do at the outset, then it's easy to set up the measurement over the ensuing time.
Yeah, that's probably the key point, is making sure that both parties fully understand what the KPIs are, and that you continue to track them as you're moving through the partnership.
Do we have any more questions? Oh, there we go.
On the topic of fan engagement, I was just wondering how much should a global communication narrative be applied when you're engaging with local fans, and if you have any examples of this?
I didn't get the question, sorry.
On the topic of fan engagement, how much should a global kind of narrative be applied to engage with local fans?
So for us, I mean, the game is played in the U.S. and Canada. The global narrative is the game on the court. So that's very important, and making sure you understand what your brand attributes are. They're not really going to change on a country-by-country basis. You are who you are. But working with local companies really helps you define how you tailor that message and how you tailor that content specifically for a country. I mean, working with Rakuten, who has much more experience in Japan than we do, has access to more than 100 million people on a regular basis, understanding how we create specific content to engage that audience, how we localize our content, whether it be language or payment solutions, or even creating specific content using our players in our game that are going to more definitively engage with that audience. That's really important.
Yeah, I think from my sponsorship take on that as well, which is really interesting, is you look at big global events like a FIFA World Cup and an Olympics, and how do you make that relevant to 200 countries across the world? The ones that do it really well they've decided what their turf is, what's their message. So it could be Visa, only card accepted. It's a very, very simple global message that they cover. And then they make themselves relevant to different markets. And what do people be passionate about in the Olympics? It's your country and your athletes. So coming up with local ambassador deals with a badminton player in India or a swimmer in Australia allows that campaign to become relevant for a global company in an individual market. But at the same time, the top message about payment systems is consistent and sort of common throughout. So I think if you don't make yourself relevant locally, people will just switch off and ignore you.
That's a great point. Any more questions from the audience? There's one more there.
Well, thank you very much. Testing. This is English microphone. Hello, testing. Can you hear it? Can you hear? Well, thank you very much. When you are in partnership with Rakuten, I mean, you are in partnership, what were some of the advantages and what are some of the things that you would like us to do or what you want to achieve in a partnership with Rakuten?
All the knowledge that they have in innovation for a club like us is key. So everything that they can teach us about innovation, that's why they are the first innovation partner from Football Club Barcelona. And I think that it's something that we need a lot from them, and we need to work very close with them to try to be as innovative as they are. So using their platforms and also trying to find ways to connect with the fans with the knowledge that they have.
I think what I said before about having access to 100 million people, that's something that is very uncommon. And not only having that access, but being so successful in the past and engaging that universe and figuring out ways to use that universe to grow the sport of basketball, which will ultimately benefit Rakuten and our partnership. I think that's, there's an expression in English, you don't know what you don't know. And we sit down at the table with Rakuten with our ears open, looking to learn as much as we possibly can, and then figure out how we maximize that opportunity.
We probably have time for just one more question. Great. I don't think we have any more questions. So I'd like to thank Scott, Guy, and Judith, personally and on behalf of Nest. Thank you very much. Very insightful indeed. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.